Hey, Kendall here with BlackOvis with my friend Aron Snyder. We're talking about boots today from Crispi and which boots Aron is running and why. I've had experience with, let's see, 3 of these boots. 2 of them I've not. Aron's had experience with 4 of these boots. So we're just going to have a little conversation. Hopefully this is helpful to you in understanding why Aron has chosen each particular boot for different conditions or different likes. Just remember, like everything, I mean, what you like, Aron, is not necessarily what I like. Same thing that some of these guys that might be watching this. So this information as far as footwear goes, just think about what you like, not necessarily what Aron and I really dig on. But in front of us, we've got 5 boots. Aron, on the left, we've got the Altitude. This is one that you're running right now, the Briksdal Mountain.
Yep. Brand
new for 2024 or 2023. The Briksdal Mountain SF. And the Briksdal Pro SF, and then right here is the original Briksdal, and this is kind of the inspiration for what has happened. This Briksdal is a 4-flex leather, but it's inspired essentially a new family, and that's what all of these boots, all of these have come out of, is really the first inspiration of that. So Aron, what boot do you want to pick first to talk about?
I'll talk about the Altitude first.
Sure.
So, and out of the gate, I like a stiffer boot for the most part when I'm doing like more extreme mountain hunting. The thing that what made me choose this is a lot of times, whether I'm on a 3D course, I'm antelope hunting, you know, maybe spot and stock or something down in Texas where it's not quite as steep or consistent, meaning I don't have a 65-pound pack going in 8 miles. This also grips really well because it forms to your feet. So let's say you were down in Mexico, climbing around on lava rock, things like that. This is going to grip a lot better. Kind of a comparison, if people look at like a Salomon Quest 4D, this is in my opinion anyway, a little more waterproof and durable version of that. Very comfortable for just about anyone. Pretty flexible as far as that goes. Waterproof wise, pretty dang decent as far as waterproof goes for a lightweight boot. It's not going to be my choice for a backpack hunt. Some people would probably choose this, but I like a little bit stiffer boot. You said this was a 3, correct?
It's stiffness? A 2.5 actually, and it was a shocker to me when you told me that you liked that boot and that you were wearing it, because I kind of have you painted into the stiff boot only corner. So it's interesting to hear that you liked it for those particular reasons, and of course, like for antelope hunting or other kind of low impact like efforts.
Yeah, and for me, I've just always ran extremely stiff footwear, but as I'm getting older, trying to, you know, my feet have issues, it is nice to wear these. Again, like I go to a 3D course or things like that, I would wear this, like a tack event, something like that. So that's the Altitude, and I actually ordered my wife these as well. She likes a more flexible boot, and she's a huge fan of this, and she uses it for everything. So we backpack in, she's wearing this. So
one of the things I think that provides the most comfort that I wanted to point out is this, if you've seen like the Nevada or Guide, this is a newer midsole from Crispi called the EFX midsole. It's got these little bellows in it, and they really actually, I think that the material is a little bit more absorbing, but that midsole is really the key, I think, to the comfort of this boot, because the upper of this boot was similar, and it's built off the Ativa platform, and that midsole on the Ativa has nothing to hold against this midsole. So it's surprising how just how cushioned and soft this is. My question for you is, do you have a narrow foot, normal foot, or a little bit wider?
I have a narrow heel and a wider forefoot. So the front of my foot's wide, my heel's a little bit narrow.
And you found that you could wear this, it wasn't too narrow for you?
No. In fact, I mean, obviously I get questions a ton on footwear, and one of the things that's nice about Crispi is a European boot generally, stereotypically, is narrower, where the Crispi is, I would say, more standard with a little bit maybe wider toe box.
Gotcha.
From my perspective on this, like most European boots I put on, my toes get scrunched and I have to reinvent the wheel to get them to fit, where these are more about perfect for me as far as width goes.
That's interesting, because my foot shape is similar to yours, but I probably have a little bit more wider forefoot because the Altitude, I just couldn't do it. But it just I don't know, just didn't conform to my foot, but I loved the feel of how comfortable it was under the foot. Next boot down the row, this one right here is the Briksdal Mountain. It's a 3-flex. Aron, tell me why. And again, I was a little surprised, but the more you've talked about it, and I got to sample this boot last year, it's ridiculously comfortable, and I think it's it's kind of that it can do anything boot.
Yeah, I pretty much suggest this, and I've worn a ton of boots from multiple different manufacturers, and that one boot is hard to find. And when I say that, all manufacturers have, different levels, but it's hard to say, hey, what boot could I hunt antelope in and go hunt elk in and whitetail? This boot, you can do all of those things in. I wore this yesterday on a day before yesterday on a death march with Anders and Steven, and we went in 8.5 miles, gained about 4,000 feet in elevation, and came back out the next day. I had zero issues with this. We didn't go in with crazy heavy packs. It's extremely waterproof. It has the lace to toe system, so you don't lose your toenails jamming your foot forward, which is huge. I thought this was closer to maybe a 3.5, 4 stiffness. Whatever it is, it's extremely comfortable. And the boot, really, where somebody's wondering what should I get, I would say this is the boot to get. I've said comfort about 4 times already. This is the most comfortable boot I've ever worn, and that just passed up, I guess, before Zamberlan 2092, which is a ski boot of a boot. So for me to go from that to this was kind of a surprise to me, and this was the one you liked, this one.
Yeah, and I'd actually agree with you. I think that this, if I had to really rate this, I'd probably say a 3.5. And I think that's compounded. Number one, the extra material you've got here. This looks like leather. It's actually it's a nubuck finished on a synthetic material. And we were talking a little bit earlier. You were saying, you said the Briksdal, which is the regular. This is a leather boot, and you said you had some experience with this one shrinking, but this one didn't.
Yeah, I actually told Mark this. I was laughing. We went through some horrific weather and negative 40-degree temperatures, and then I lived beside a fire for 4 to 5 hours. This is a little bit more susceptible to shrinking. Now, you don't ever want to dry a boot off by the fire. You don't ever want to leave it in the sun when it's soaking wet, things like that, because it will shrink, but things happen. And so this material is going to be a little bit less susceptible to shrinking if you ever pull a knucklehead move and leave your boots by the fire for 4 or 5 hours to dry them out. So, but there's nothing wrong with the Briksdal. This is a great boot. I wore this in 2017 quite a bit, and it's durable. I mean, it's comfortable and everything else, but this is definitely more of a favorite for me, the Mountain.
For sure. The Mountain, for anyone that might be watching, my go-to do everything boot in the past has been Nevada, and after using this last fall elk hunting, I made the decision that this is now my go-to. Just can do everything in, and the comfort is kind of out of this world. And
talk about the Nevada. I don't wear the Nevada as much. The Nevada is more the material. It's very pliable, so it's extremely comfortable.
It's a soft leather, yeah.
Soft leather, but it can stretch on extreme mountain hunts. When I say stretch, not a ton, but it's a little more flexible. This is going to be a little bit better for that. So like if you get, I would say, in Nevada a little bit wet, then you side hill for 5 miles. You're going to have to lace up your boots, where this isn't as susceptible as that Nevada that I've found.
Because it's synthetic versus leather.
Yep, exactly, 100%. But you always pay a tollman, right? I mean, there's always give and take with every boot.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that's really good to point out, because most people don't consider, they're always just looking for the pro, and then when something does let them down, they're like, hey, what the heck? And it's like, hey, there are pros and cons for every boot within whatever category.
The Nevada is a boot you can wear out of the house the first day you have it, for the most part, with zero issues, almost already broken in. This is going to take a little bit more break-in time than a Nevada from what I've seen.
I noticed one of the guys in the office today was wearing the Nevada. I mean, he wore them yesterday too, and it's that comfortable. The guy's wearing them every single day. Yeah. Next up in this lineup, the Briksdal Mountain SF, brand new for 2023. This is the boot I would have said, like, oh yeah, this, Aron, if you're going to pick a Crispi, this is probably the one you're going to go for. Tell me, where would you make that switch from the Mountain to the Mountain SF? Like, what terrain, what conditions, what kind of hunt requires you to go from, okay, I'm loving this boot in the Briksdal Mountain, to I really need that extra, the stiffness from what I would say is a 3.5 to a 5.
And as we're talking about this, I've worn the SF as much as I've worn just the standard Mountain.
Okay, that's good to know.
Last week I hiked in to go fishing into a high lake, which is generally, what I do when I'm bored and can't go hunting, and I wore the SF, zero problems at all. It just was more than I needed. I had a 35-pound pack. Since that stiffness, you're not going to be quite as agile, let's say, trying to boulder hop, in my case, cross logs over rivers and not die. You're going to want something a little more flexible. For me, if I had to pick one for everything, I actually would pick the SF when you're talking about extreme, high altitude, crazy hunts. So For me, if I'm more of a high country mule deer hunter, the SF. If I'm doing more goat and sheep hunting, the SF. But most people aren't doing that as much as they are lower land or moderate elevation elk hunts, things like that. So steep and deep, I would say I would run an SF. You're going to burn your calves out a lot less with that more stiffness. So the more you're flexing your foots, the more you're flexing your calf. Stiffer boots going to be better on your legs climbing for the most part, but you're not going to be as comfortable for the most part either. You have given me crap, rightfully so. I've worn mountaineering boots antelope hunting. Like, I like a stiff boot. This one just happens to be a little bit different as far as that standard mountain. But again, if I had to pick one, it would be that SF, because I am up in the altitude quite a bit on my hunts.
Tell me this. This is a question I've thought about, and I've actually had someone ask me this before, and so I'm curious to know your thoughts. If you're a heavier guy or a lighter guy, does that impact going from like a 5 flex down to a 3.5 or 3, or like what would you tell a guy that's 150 soaking wet out of the shower versus a guy that's like 220, 240, all pack and everything? Like is there a recommendation, like, or is it just like, man, it's really whatever you want?
I would say if I had to take a poll from all talking to so many different people, bigger guys like a stiffer boot. Like, you look at South, he can wear a moccasin, right? I mean, he can wear, whatever, but generally bigger guys are going to like a little bit stiffer boot. The other thing too is ankle support on these. They're all pretty high ankle support. So if you have a little bit more fragile ankles or not do as well at mobility or side hilling, that little bit higher of all these boots is going to be better. But I would say for a bigger guy, a little bit stiffer has been what I've found kind of the choice. But I'm not a foot doctor, but I'll pull up the hood and look at your shoes. But I would say if you are 6'1", 220, I would bet you'll probably like an SF or the standard mountain more than like an altitude.
Yeah, plus the other thing, it's good, and I assumed that was the case, but I was just curious to get your perspective. I know plenty of guys are asking you questions. The one thing that is different between the altitude and the rest of this Briksdal family here is the ABSS, which if any of you guys have not seen before, that orange tag inside the Crispi boot stands for ankle bone support system. It's essentially a memory type foam that is that's built into the area surrounding the ankle bone, so that as soon as you're lacing that up, cinching up that boot, it's providing stability without limiting your movement and such.
One thing I wanted to mention before we move on about the Briksdal family is the lacing system, and I kind of screwed this up not talking about it yet. This is the most versatile lacing system you will find in any boot I've ever seen, meaning you have a lot of options with how you lace your boot. I actually skip this lace.
That lace loop, and I've often said that's an optional lace loop, and people kind of look at me a little funny.
Yeah,
I think it totally is optional.
Yeah, there's no rule book that I've ever read that says you have to use every one, and it is weird for people. But this would cause a little bit of pinch in my ankle, and one of my close friends, Derek, told me that, and I'm like, dude, skip the lace. He's like, oh yeah, he just didn't think about it. I'm like, dude, I don't use that lace. Now, let's say these get broken into a different level, maybe I'll add that lace, but for me, I don't ever use that lace. It doesn't affect the boot at all. It's a little bit more comfortable, but if you need that lace, you could use it. You could skip this lace, you could do whatever. This is extremely versatile. You have a locking lace down here, so when I say locking lace, you can scrunch up the toe super tight or leave it a little loose, lock that in, and then lock the ankle tight or loose.
It creates two different zones of lacing potential.
Yeah, and that's huge on this whole family. People don't think about that, but I can tell you, when your feet start to swell, which happens in the high country, or you want to really lace something up tight, but you don't want to pinch the crap out of your toes if you're going downhill, this family of boots offers that, which is great. So.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because the other oddity that I've seen, and I've actually employed, is skipping maybe I skip this first one, I go to the second one, and then I come back down to that first one. There's a ton of different techniques, but I think it's worth that call out, because a lot of guys, most everyone, you're taught since you're a kid, like lace up your shoes. You do everything. It's like we're just a bunch of sheep following what we've done before. But that is an optional lace loop, and I'm often surprised that people question that is optional or not.
Yeah.
Briksdal Pro SF. This boot. It is a leather. Yeah, this is the beast mode. This is a 5 flex, so it's similar to the Mountain SF. Anything with the SF nomenclature from Crispi is going to be stiff flex, and that is a 5 flex. This one is created I remember when guys first saw this that were guides, the Briksdal Mountain or the Briksdal Pro, it was a 4 flex, not a 5 flex. And the first question that mountain guides and most of the sheep hunting crews said, when are you going to build this in a 5 flex?
Yep.
And so Crispi went back to the drawing board and built this. The one difference, so in the mountain series and in the regular Briksdal, all through the tongue, you've got a leather in the toe area. And that was an actual improvement. If you look inside here, there's it's just like there's more fabric down in the very, very toe. What Crispi found was like if you're crossing like a glacial stream, you're getting a lot of that silt and those little stones down in here. It was actually damaging some of the gore.
Yep.
So they've reinforced in the Briksdal Mountain series the toe with some leather in here, but it still has the stretched nylon that goes up through the body of the tongue. On the Briksdal Pro SF and on the Briksdal Pro, which are both a 10-inch high boot, the difference is that leather goes all the way up to that point right there. So you're going to get a little bit more. This is an insulated version, so it's a 200 gram, where these are non-insulated. But you're going to get more protection in the tongue, especially if you're in shale and talus and then you're crossing those glacial streams. Because every time you step inside one of those glacial streams, all that, if you've seen an underwater camera, all the stone and the silt come up and around and kind of cascade on top of the boot. So that, while it's not going to actually damage it initially, if it gets stuck down in there, it's just going to grind.
Long term.
Yeah.
And all it is just friction once you get in there.
Yeah.
And the thing to think about with these boots and improvements, because obviously I've worn Crispis off and on for a while, and then I went probably 3 years, I guess, maybe probably 4 or 5 years now not wearing Crispis. And then when you and I talked, I was like, hey man, I want to give these a run. There's been a lot of changes.
Yeah, that's good to hear.
This was not this material before. This was more of Cordura.
Yeah, this is a PU Tech, which we've seen that improvement from Crispi over the last about 4 years in various models.
Leaking is the big one. This is way less susceptible to leaking long term over the Cordura type fabric you had before. This here, not just everything Kendall said is correct as far as silt. This here, having that, also people don't think about this, thorns. When thorns poke through that Gore-Tex layer, it's a higher probability of it to leak eventually. Then this is always the worst part in a boot.
Because you're pulling your foot up and through the bush like that, and that gets dragged along.
Yep, and you can get holes, and that's with any boot. It doesn't matter. Where now these are beefed up, so that's not an issue. And that's like Arizona. You could wear this boot, let's say in Arizona, and you don't have to worry about the thorns as much poking through here or here. So a lot more waterproof than. And nothing wrong with this, but over time, again, you can get holes in that toe portion of this compared from the Briksdal to the mountain. And this isn't something everyone's going to have to worry about.
We're obviously nitpicking certain pieces, but I remember talking to the team at Crispi, and the guys that were getting a lot of rock and silt in there were almost predominantly Alaskan.
100%.
BC Alaska. Yeah, these are guys that are residents in Alaska. They're literally going out 20 days, or guides that are going out 20 to 40 days, and they're in shale all day long. So that is a really interesting point, and it doesn't necessarily apply to everybody. I
would say it applies to far closer to no one than everyone. When I say that, meaning if you're an elk hunter, if you're a mule deer hunter, things like that, when I say it's a non-issue. In Alaska, if you hike in 15 miles, you've probably done 20 river crossings to get that far in. It's just way more, it's just wetter. It rains more. Same with BC. But I will say, my Briksdals, the original set, I still have them, they never leaked. But I did take care of the boots, and that's one thing, if you guys don't mind, to talk about a little bit.
That was the last thing I wanted to talk about, was really care, because what we're talking about is stones and grit, and I'm not talking stones, I'm talking like little things that you may not even feel.
Yep.
But those get down in there, and so then it becomes like important from the care standpoint. So as you're approaching, like this is your kind of primary lineup right now. What are you doing on these boots to make sure that you're taking care of them?
So this here, there's not a ton you have to worry about. I do pull the laces out, and I take a toothbrush and I just clean under this leather. Other than that, I just put whatever applicable waterproofing every now and then on this boot, especially in this tongue area here, because that's where every boot's most susceptible. These are a little bit different. I One is also.
Are you still going to take the toothbrush down into this area by releasing the?
I do.
The laces? Okay.
I do this more than on these. So down in this lower area, and anybody that's hunted the mountains.
Yeah, I can see your thumb. Like, I mean, it's
deep.
going all the way into that stitch line right there.
I strongly suggest pull the laces out, especially after a really difficult hunt. Let them dry out, get in there, and it doesn't have to be a toothbrush, any kind of paintbrush with stiff bristles. Clean all of that out. Then I basically just take a t-shirt and I wrap it around my 2 fingers, and then I put waterproofing. You guys sell waterproofing, you pick it up on BlackOvis. Waterproof everything once it's cleaned. Now up here where you get the more synthetic material here, I actually use a different waterproofing than what I do on the leather, and I do that once every month or 2 depending upon how crappy stuff I've been doing, really. And that's the same on all these with any boot. The thing is it's no different than anything else. If you don't clean it, it will not last as long. If you don't treat it with care, it will not last as long. And the thing with Gore-Tex is Gore-Tex, I think, has a lifetime warranty, but I generally say if your boots don't leak for a year, you're doing pretty good. And that's with any boot. And I don't know if you have found the same thing, but if you waterproof them and treat them right, they will last much longer than a year. If you don't, you get a year, maybe 2 out of waterproofness out of any boot. I would say that's a miracle, and I don't know what you've found with that.
Yeah, I mean, I actually have had a pair of Crispis that did leak, and we actually tore them apart, and we found that a thorn, it was that old Cordura material in Idaho, a thorn had actually gotten through down to the toe area.
Yep.
And I mean, we're talking like just the very tip of, let's say, like a rose type thorn. Super interesting that, but a year or 2, I can anticipate oftentimes 3 or 4. But the one thing that's cool is Crispi does offer like the 1-year warranty against waterproofness and any other manufacturer defect. Outside of that, Gore has a program where you can, if there's still life in the boot, and that's the big if.
Yeah.
Some guys might be like, it's down to just slicks,
which is extremely dishonest.
And they're saying,
cool.
hey, like these boots still they should be waterproof. It's like, well, you just you've got like 3 more days of use on that boot.
Yeah.
But if the boot has life on the boot, then they'll warranty that. And they'll replace it.
The thing is, if you take care of your boots, they will last a very, very long time. And waterproof the boot, keep the boot clean. There's a ton of different stuff you can look on BlackOvis as far as treatment. And just be smart about it. When you get back, clean them once they're dry, brush them off, waterproof treat them, get them clean again, or get them waterproofed again and head back out. And they'll also, as far as break-in time, well, kind of bouncing around here, when you are breaking these boots in, because a lot of times I will lather them up pretty good because it helps basically like breaking in a baseball mitt, let's say.
It softens that material a little bit.
Softens the material up. That's not horrible to do out of the gate, but I get this question a lot. This to me is like a break-in time of 5 miles. Like this boot's gonna break in really quick, something like a 3.5 flex. This is like 5 minutes. This is gonna break in super quick. This gonna need a little bit longer, right? It's stiffer, so you're gonna have to get a little bit more broken in up top because the actual shank is stiffer. This, again, a little bit longer, that's about the same. So when you get a boot and you're trying to get, what do I do with it? How long does it take to break it in? Things like that. It's different for everyone, but I would say the stiffer the boot, the longer it takes, it's gonna take to break in. But you can help that out by, again, using that, soften up the leather a bit.
Man, I think we've covered about everything, man. This has been a good discussion about the Briksdal family and the Altitude and why you're using these 3 boots as your primary go-to for this year. And of course, if a guy wants the little bit taller height, the Briksdal Pro is a great option beyond the Mountain SF. Aron, thanks for the conversation about boots. If you've got any questions about what we've been talking about today, leave a comment below. Certainly give one of our gear guides a call. We can talk to you about any of the Crispi boots, or you've mentioned Zamberlan, Solomon. We carry all those boots as well on BlackOvis, and really at the end of the day, as you've experimented with tons of boots, it's trying to find that right boot that fits your foot shape, that fits the type of use that you're demanding on it. And so there are a lot of options out there. So I appreciate the conversation, the time. It's good to have you in house, and
Yeah,
any
no,
last
thanks.
Parting elements on this?
No, other than fit is key. Find what fits you, and don't listen to any other knucklehead. Certainly don't listen to me at times. I'll give you some advice, but find what fits, and you're going to be happy, and your feet are going to be happy as well and well taken care of. So,
right on.
Yeah.
Aron, checking in here at BlackOvis HQ. Thanks for coming in.
Yep, thank you.